I don't like the word fan because it means fanatic. And when people talk about being fans of the show, I'd much rather hear viewers, podcast family members. I mean, we're not real family. I'm not Mr. Rogers pretending you're in the room with me. That's all very, very funky. But you're part of the family that keeps this thing going. And many of you have been with me for a decade through local radio and through this now. But I really don't like the word fan. So I don't want to say I'm a fan of John Lennon. I love this music. When I was writing songs and playing in bands, he was probably next to John Mellencamp, my biggest influence. They're very different songwriters. But there's this thing that's happened with John Lennon, and it bugs the heck out of me. John Lennon was a guy who wanted truth, right? He wanted us to be truthful, right? He wanted to be able to speak truth, right? He wanted to be real, right? He wanted the fantasy of the Beatles torn up, the mythology of the Beatles destroyed. Okay, let's destroy the mythology around John Lennon. Let's do what John Lennon said that he wanted done. Let's get down to the truth. After all, on the White Album, that's what they were seeking, right? Just the Beatles, warts and all, no fancy production, until John Lennon turned around and said, hey, Phil Spector, come in and create the wall of sound. Complicated dude, John Lennon, but let's tell some truths about him, beginning with the fact that he was not always the peace and lovenik. In fact, if you ask Cynthia Lennon, he wasn't that at all, not in the way he left her. We'll talk about that. I'll talk about this experience I had in New York City when I first saw the Dakota, and something that's across the street from the Dakota that you've not seen. And if you like his music or you consider yourself a fan of John Lennon, it's something you should go see one day. It's actually very cool. So stay calm. Don't get all freaked out when I talk about this, because some people get very, very angry with the reality check on John Lennon. We're headed into a Christmas season, and you're going to hear the Lennon song that he puts Yoko on, War's Over If You Want It. We're going to hear this, so this is Christmas, right? That can be something very peaceful for people. Other people find the holidays very difficult. Some people find it emotionally difficult, depressing. It's creating anxiousness in people. It creates a sense of unease in people for many. That's sad because, of course, it's the birth of the Savior of all mankind. But look at all the machinations of Christmas. There's money. Man, how much money is going out of the house for these Christmas gifts? I know families who come home and one spouse or the other has filled the room with gifts. Where'd these come from? We needed something, not all this. Combine that with paying for kids' college, etc., for people to come to your house if you're traveling, for an Airbnb, getting there, getting sick while you're there. Or, you know, that one relative who won't leave. Has that ever happened to you? You're coming home and go, okay, so I know they let, and it's still there. It's like Christmas vacation come to life, except there's no RV. They're sitting in your front room snacking in their not even long underwear. Hey, Bob. It can create a lot of stress. Here's a way to deal with that. My friends at Bioptimizers are famous for the product Magnesium Breakthrough, which a lot of people use to help with sleep. That's how I use it, a couple tablets before bed. But it also regulates the stress hormone cortisol. Cortisol at high levels makes you feel all that wigged out feeling. It also causes your body to store fat. That's one reason people get fat over the holidays, is not only just eating too much, but that stress. So choose calm. Go to bioptimizers.com/Todd. Use promo code Todd to get an extra 10% off Magnesium Breakthrough. That's bioptimizers.com/Todd, promo code Todd, and save that extra 10%. This is a picture of the Strawberry Fields placard. It's across the street from the Dakota now condos. Used to be a hotel, I guess. Across the street from that in New York City. First time I had an opportunity to actually walk around New York, I got to spend the night and get up in the morning and on a Saturday and be in New York. I walked up through Central Park and I could see a building. I saw the top of it. I just realized that's the Dakota. That's where John Lennon was shot. And I wasn't sure. So I approached the building. There's no sign anywhere. It didn't say the Dakota. But I walked up to the security guard and said, is this the Dakota? He goes, yes, sir. So I stood there for a minute thinking about John Lennon yelling, I'm hit, Yoko, I'm hit. Then across the street, there's this Strawberry Fields placard that was put there because, of course, when John Lennon was killed, thousands and thousands of people came from across New York. And they sang, all we are saying is give peace a chance. John Lennon was not always a peaceful man. John Lennon wrote a song with the Beatles that shocks people if they've never really stopped and listened to it. It's called Run for Your Life. Completely a Lennon creation. McCartney had very little, if anything, to do with it. read that as, I'm going to leave you if I catch you with another man, but that's not the way I read it. I don't want to get all copyright noticed. To me, it's a suggestion that at best, I'm going to catch you and beat you. Also be suggesting that I'm going to catch you and end you, because that's the end, little girl. John Lennon was not a particularly nice man to Cynthia. And I guess the stress of fame and traveling and getting married young, and maybe he shouldn't have gotten married to Sin, but he did. Do you know how he left her, right? Do you know how he left Cynthia, his wife, and mother of his first kid? He was going to India with the Beatles to go hang out with a Maharishi. And Cynthia was late for the train. And she saw the train leaving with her husband on it and the rest of the Beatles and their girlfriends. So she started to try to run to catch up with the train. And she couldn't catch up. And according to Cynthia, John leaned his head out the train door and said, "It's okay, Sin, I'm with Yoko now anyway." Quite a way to end a marriage, isn't it? John was a complicated guy. So he wanted truth. He wanted to strip away the myth of the Beatles. So let's strip this all away. Yoko kicked him out of the house for quite a while, so he had his lost weekend. She furnished him an Asian girlfriend, a Yoko lookalike, a woman named May Pang, to be his comfort woman. I mean, he can't have John Lennon out there with an Asian woman for him to, well, gain comfort from. She created a relationship with his son, Sean. And he had sort of abandoned Julian, his first son, who spent a long time without a dad. John's father had abandoned him. John's father was a mess, far worse than John Lennon ever was. John Lennon's father abandoned him. John Lennon's mother died. So how did he turn around and find it okay to abandon his son, Julian? Well, he was with Yoko now. Now, none of this means that I'm not an appreciative person for his music, and I don't recognize the fact that he was a complicated guy with some very, very good aspects to his personality. Truly, he did that. He became a bread-baking, staying-at-home husband and was eventually convinced to make music again. And there's one thing that a lot of people don't know. Do you know that it was very possible there was going to be a Beatles reunion? Do you know that? They almost did it. John and Paul almost went to the studios of Saturday Night Live to perform together. They just about did it. Because in Saturday Night Live, they'd been offering this money, kind of joking around. They almost did it. They almost took their acoustic guitars down and almost played the song Two of Us. Paul McCartney has recently said that was not about John Lennon. He's lying. It's absolutely about he and John Lennon. It's not about he and a girl. Listen to the song. Of all the music Lennon created, there's one that I like to think of. I wish he'd stayed home. I wish he'd brought Julian home. It was when he was on the sidelines. This is classic John Lennon explaining things in ways artistic and beautiful, even if it has to do, still does. He was a complicated man. He treated his first wife horribly. He treated his first son horribly. Gosh, he made beautiful music. The biggest tragedy in the John Lennon story is this. I don't think he ever came to know the Lord. He's the guy who wrote Imagine after all. Imagine there's no heaven. Imagine.